welcome back to another video on the Love Project. The goal of this channel is to spread positivity, love, and peace. And specifically with this video series, I'm going to be shining a light on some positive news stories that can hopefully lift your mood and make you feel like the world is going in a good place. And give you a little bit of, because I know that news stories can typically be kind of depressing and sad. So let's change that. We're on network.org and we're going through 4 articles for today, May 20th. So we're going to be talking about surgeons performing the world's first human bladder transplant, snowy owls being kept safe from jets at the Boston airport, and making history in England. And then apparently physicists turned lead into gold. So a little bit of alchemy, a little bit of a scientific breakthrough. See what that looks like. We're going to dive into this. So let's look. So first, the first human bladder transplant was successfully carried out at University of California, LA, an attempt that had been 4 years in the making. There are naturally many associated with the procedure, which has previously only been done on cadavers. And those questions might be, how well will the transplanted bladder function immediately after the surgery and over time? Have not been done previously, in part because of the complicated vascular structure of the pelvic area and the technical complexity of the procedure. However, urine drained immediately into the new bladder, and the patient's kidney, which also had to be replaced, needed no post-procedure dialysis. The two worked in perfect tandem. So that means the surgery was a success. Win. Massive win. The surgery was completed at UCLA Medical Center. The team was led by Dr. Nima Nassiri, a urologic transplant surgeon and director of UCLA's pioneering bladder replacement research program, with the help from Dr. Inderber Gill, not sure if I pronounced that right, founding executive director of USC Urology. Kudos to those two and the team, the entire team. This first attempt at bladder transplantation has been over 4 years in the making, Nassiri said. For the appropriately selected patient, it is exciting to be able to offer a new potential option. Absolutely agreed. The patient had lost most of his bladder during a tumor removal, leaving the remainder too small and compromised to work. Both of his kidneys were also subsequently removed due to renal cancer to earlier kidney disease. As a result, he was on dialysis for 7 years. The biggest risks of organ transplantation are the body's potential rejection of the organ and the side effects caused by the mandatory immune suppressing drugs given to prevent organ rejection. So because of the need for long-term immunosuppression, the best current candidates are those who are already either on immunosuppression or have an imminent need for it. Absolutely. Typically those experimental surgeries and drugs are usually given to people who are in dire situations. I feel like that's ethical. I don't know the procedure medically, but typically that's how it's done. Nassiri said, adding that it's another Siri thought I said Siri. I did not. Nassiri said, adding that it's another of the unknowns associated with the procedure. How long immunosuppression will be necessary, which he and his team will be closely monitoring. Nassiri and Gill collaborated for several years to develop the surgical technique. Numerous preclinical procedures were performed at University of Southern California and Southern California's Organ Procurement Organization to prepare for the first human bladder transplant. During the complex 8-hour procedure, the surgeons transplanted the donated kidney. Following that with the bladder, the two were then connected using the technique that Nassiri and Gill pioneered. Quote, the kidney immediately made a large volume of urine, and the patient's kidney function improved immediately. End quote, Nassiri said. There was no need for any dialysis after surgery, and the urine drained properly into the new bladder. Amazing. So that is another article. Millions of people around the globe experience some degree of bladder disease and dysfunction. Some develop terminal bladders that are either non-functioning and or cause constant pain, repeated infections, and other complications. Current treatment for severe terminal cases of bladder dysfunction or a bladder that has been removed due to various conditions include replacement or augmentation of the urinary reservoir. These surgeries use a portion of the patient's intestine to create a new bladder or a pathway for the urine to exit the body. While these surgeries can be effective, they come with many short and long-term risks that compromise a patient's health, such as internal bleeding, bacterial infection, and digestive issues, which sounds absolutely rough and horrible. Hopefully the patient, who was unnamed, is recovering, has a speedy recovery, and doesn't experience many, if not any, term or short-term side effects. A bladder transplant, on the other hand, results in a more normal urinary reservoir, Nasiri said. Okay, it is incredibly gratifying to see him take this work from the laboratory to human patients at UCLA, which operates the busiest and most successful solid organ transplant program in the Western United States. Absolutely kudos to those guys. That is amazing. The first human bladder transplant. So we're going to move on to the next article. Snowy owls are kept safe from jets at Boston Airport thanks to dedicated researcher. And if you're an animal lover, you'll probably like this story. A bird lover has been rescuing and relocating snowy owls from the Boston airport for over a decade, ensuring 900 of these majestic hunters can return home after winter. The star of a recent award-winning documentary, Norman Smith, a raptor specialist at the Massachusetts Society, says it's been an incredible experience to learn about these birds since he pulled the first one off the runway in 1981, the first human bladder transplant. So we're going to move on to the next article. Snowy owls are kept safe from jets at Boston Airport thanks to dedicated researcher. And if you're an animal lover, you'll probably like this story. A bird lover has been rescuing and relocating snowy owls from the Boston airport for over a decade, ensuring 900 of these majestic hunters can return home after winter. The star of a recent award-winning documentary, Norman Smith, a raptor specialist at the Massachusetts Society, says it's been an incredible experience to learn about these birds since he pulled the first one off the runway in 1981. Logan International Airport is no stranger to snow, nor the owls of the same name that most people would associate with the Arctic. The reality is that BOS shares many similarities to their Arctic homes. It looks very much like the Arctic tundra, Smith told CBS Boston. It's short, very short, mowed grass like it is in the Arctic. It's surrounded on three sides by water, so there's plenty of food on the airport. A threat to an airplane, and vice versa. The awkward fact is that the 5 islands which make up East Boston contain the highest concentration of snowy owls in the American Northeast. I did not know that. That is interesting. They migrate here from the Arctic to spend the winter. Many are attracted by the airport similarities to home, as Smith explained, but aside from a turbine engine, there are plenty of other hazards for them to face. One mature female had her feathers burned off after landing on a snow melter. Electrocutions and collisions with fences are other dangers. If an owl becomes thusly injured, Smith will help transport them to the Blue Hills Trailside Museum in Milton, where they can undergo rehabilitation before Smith releases them back into wilder areas. So that's still a little bit more. The ones unable to be released are available for locals to see up close at the Audubon, still not pronouncing that right probably, Audubon property. It's been an incredible experience to learn about these birds and see what they do, where they go, and how long they might live, Smith said. Together we can better understand, appreciate, and care for the world in which we live. Logan International Airport is no stranger to snow, nor the owls of the same name that most people would associate with the Arctic. The reality is that BOS shares many similarities to their Arctic homes. It looks very much like the Arctic tundra, Smith told CBS Boston. It's short, very short, mowed grass like it is in the Arctic. It's surrounded on three sides by water, so there's plenty of food on the airport. A threat to an airplane, and vice versa. The awkward fact is that The 5 islands which make up East Boston contain the highest concentration of snowy owls in the American Northeast. I did not know that. That is interesting. They migrate here from the Arctic to spend the winter. Many are attracted by the airport similarities to home, as Smith explained, but aside from a turbine engine, there are plenty of other hazards for them to face. One mature female had her feathers burned off, after landing on a snow melter. Electrocutions and collisions with fences are other dangers. If an owl becomes thusly injured, that's a beautiful quote at the end. Hopefully that cheered up your day a little bit. We've got 2 more articles. Refugee makes history, becoming British ambassador. Quote, Mom was worried I wasn't English enough. This is an Iranian-born British lawyer. It's made history as the UK's first High Commissioner to come to the country as a refugee, which is amazing. Fleeing the post-revolutionary landscape to arrive in Great Britain without a word of English on his lips. Kanbar Hossein Bor admitted his mother was rather nervous when she first heard he was planning to join the Foreign Office, equivalent of the U.S. State Department. In her mind, this was a bastion of the establishment. She was a little worried of rejection, he told The Guardian, adding that her base fear was that he wasn't English enough. Born to a Balochi family in the trinational landscape of the arid southeast of Iran, where the country shares a border with Afghanistan, Balochistan, Pakistan. Sorry if I'm butchering that. His mother fled to the UK, and Kanbar had to be smuggled eastward across the Asian landscape en route to France and eventually England to start a new life in the quiet seaside town of Southampton, far from the rural classrooms where he grew up chanting "Death to America and Israel" with his classmates. Now he becomes the first refugee to hold a position of High Commissioner, a senior UK diplomat who acts as ambassador to other Commonwealth nations. Officially, Mr. Hossein Bor is the High Commissioner to the Republic of Fiji, non-resident British High Commissioner of the Republic of Kiribati, and His Majesty's non-resident ambassador to the Federated States of Micronesia, and the Republic of Marshall Islands. Because these were former British colonial possessions, the UK's ambassador is titled High Commissioner. Balochi, Arabic, and Farsi speaker Hossein Bor's international outlook was fostered through the tales of the Persian Empire and interactions with other members of his Balochi family. A stateless and often suppressed ethnic group of more than 10 million people split between the 3 countries, the Balochi have at various points over the last 2,000 years ruled themselves through powerful tribal dynasties. Hossein Bor told The Guardian that having received the position, a particularly wild feeling came when he realized that he held the same post as former British imperial officer whose job it was to divide and rule the Balochi tribes. Wow, that is very ironic. Reflecting on Sir Robert Sandman, in particular, who literally wrote the book on the subject, which Hossein Bor has read, he quotes, quote, he says, "For me to be his administrative successor, one of the great-grandchildren of the tribes, in the same building as him, both of us pursuing British national interest, albeit in a very different time, was quite a moment because it reflects how the UK has changed, an instrument of change." That's a beautiful tale. That's a beautiful quote at the end as well. That's awesome. We're going to go ahead and finish with the last story. Filling the dream of medieval alchemist, physicists turn lead into gold. Accidentally. Physicists experimenting with a giant particle accelerator accidentally proved medieval alchemists right that base metals could be turned into gold. Someone's going to get rich. While studying electromagnetic dissociation and beam losses, the physicist at CERN's Large Hadron Collider saw that the lead they started with had transformed into approximately 86 billion atoms of gold. How much is that worth? Is that a lot? Don't let the high number fool you. The nugget measured in the picogram range. Okay, all right, well, that explains that. Less than a trillionth of the weight of a paperclip. Wow, okay, but it's still possible. The experiment showed that fundamental transformations of metal are possible without smashing particles together at super high speed. How did they do it? The experiment was able to shave several protons off of the lead atom by positioning it so that they just barely missed each other. Okay. When this happened, the scientists explained powerful electromagnetic fields caused them to change into different elements. Lead contains 82 protons. By losing just 3, it arrives at the atomic number of gold, so it just becomes gold. The experiment was part of the ALICE collaboration, a funny acronym that stands for a Large Ion Collider Experiment. It's currently studying quark gluon plasma, a state of matter difficult, if not impossible, to observe here on Earth. That is believed to be very close to conditions in the universe during and just after the Big Bang. They also have an image showing what it looks like when the elements are colliding, just barely scraping each other. To summarize the complex theory of quantum chromodynamics, the ALICE team are trying to study why these subatomic particles, quarks, and gluons are always confined together and can't be observed in isolation. Pursuant to that goal, the ALICE team, comprising almost 2,000 scientists from 174 physics institutes and 40 countries, watched as the LHC provided collisions between lead ions that recreated conditions similar to those just after the Big Bang. Under these extreme conditions, protons and neutrons melt, freeing the quarks from their bonds with the gluons. It's impressive that our detectors can handle both major collisions that create thousands of particles in these smaller events that make just a few particles at a time. Marco van Leuven, who leads the ALICE project, said in a press release, the collaboration has recently doubled the amount of gold it can produce, which only exists for an instant before breaking apart, and this is the first time they've been able to use their ALICE detector instrument to study the gold they create. Dang, that's kind of a shame. So I guess it just goes away after it turns into gold. So, quote, the result also tests and improve theoretical models of electromagnetic dissociation, which, beyond their intrinsic physics interest, are used to understand and predict beam losses that are a major limit to the performance of the LHC and future colliders, Jouet said in the release. And then lastly, turning lead into gold was a recurring theme in alchemy for thousands of years. It continually came up in experiments and writings by alchemists as the ultimate end of any practice. So I guess we made it. We made it to the end of science. We have completed science. Congratulations. As recently as the 1500s, Caterina Sforza, the Lady of Imola, was experimenting with alchemy and managed to create talc, which, rather than being recognized for its use in protecting babies' bottoms, was also inevitably believed to be capable of turning other metals like silver into gold. So that's very interesting. Those are all good things. Scientific breakthroughs, medical breakthroughs, some pretty good stories about people's interactions with their past and how they're overcoming those things and achieving greatness, as well as a nice story about an owl being saved, multiple owls. So hopefully that cheered up your day. This is Good News Stories. This is the Love Project. Thank you for watching, and tune in next time.